Well, we're going to leave that press. Of course, there was so much in that, but we will return to that later because we're bringing you breaking news this evening, and it's really very sad news. Veteran human rights lawyer George Bizos has died at the age of 92. Of course, he has had an incredible career, an incredible human rights activist, and he has been central to so many pivotal points in our history as a country. You know, he arrived in South Africa when he was just 13 years old from Greece. He was a World War II refugee. He made South Africa his home. He studied at Wits, became a lawyer. He went on to defend Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu at the Rivonia and treason trials. He has represented so many key families during the struggle against apartheid. He represented Steve Biko's family, Chris Hani's family, Cradock 4 family. He also represented Neil Aggart's family at that first inquest after he died in custody in 1982. He was involved in representing families from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And also, of course, we'll remember that he was very involved in the Farlam Commission, representing many families. He was acting for the Legal Resources Centre. So the news is sad. We lose a very key member of what South Africa is all about. I just want to read to you something that's come from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, who have confirmed that he has indeed passed this evening. We are immensely saddened by the news of the passing of George Bizos, a towering giant in so many facets of our liberation struggle. Now all the Rivonia trialists are joined by the last member of their legal team, Hamba Kahle, Uncle George. And I'm joined now by our reporter, Heidi Giokos. Good evening, Heidi. Of course, George Bizos was Greek and a very integral member of the Greek community. Just tell us what you're hearing from that community and beyond as the sad news breaks this evening.
Yes, indeed, Sally. I mean, it's actually quite difficult to speak at this stage. I have a lump in my throat, and it's just unbelievable. And just hearing what the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation had to say about how they are all together now, and that's exactly it. Almost the last standing member joining in, how he fought for them just living a proper life, for having rights like everybody else should have had. And I actually got wind of this while I was driving home from the Greek community, and it truly is such a sad moment because George Bizos was known for his commitment to education, was known for building a Greek school. He was adamant to building a Greek school in Johannesburg, and he was part of forming Saheti School. He always used to attend Greek events. I remember him from a very young age, always attending Greek events, making an effort to stick to his roots and his heritage. And I'm going to give you an example of the last time I actually saw George Bizos. It was last year at his 92nd birthday. And I was with my little niece. She was 2 at the time. And as old as he was, he embraced us. And that's how he always was, always wanting to help and always wanting to embrace. And I remember him sitting at the table with so many people wanting to just take a photo with him and engage with him. And he was always so willing. Very big part of the Greek community. And it's with great sadness that we have lost George Bizos.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, he just was so pivotal to so many key moments in our history, representing so many families, the family of Steve Biko, the family of Chris Hani, Neil Aggart's family after he died, the Cradock 4. I mean, this man was there. He represented Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu, an absolute powerhouse of commitment. How do you think he'll be remembered by his family? Did you interact with his family? We understand that he's survived by 3 sons.
Well, I didn't really get to engage with his family. I wish I could bring my dad into the conversation because he obviously engaged a lot with the Greek community. But I think he will be remembered, as you said, as very present, as always willing to help in the moment, a complete powerhouse, and always willing to make a difference, make a change. he's represented so many families that were in need. And actually, there was a part of an article that I read a while back. It was actually when I last saw him at that birthday and those Greek events, where he indicated how his time in primary school was not unlike those the children of Soweto attended during apartheid years. He explained how the struggles that he endured in a small rural village in Greece where he grew up, how difficult it was, but how that molded him, and you know, how when he came to South Africa, he wanted to make that kind of difference. So I think he'll definitely be remembered as always willing to help, making such a big difference. And even at such an age as 92, he was still very present, still always willing to engage with the community and always wanting to help. So that's definitely how I will always remember him, and I'm sure his loved ones in South Africa will as well.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Saheti School, which of course is the Greek school here in Johannesburg, and they have sent out a very powerful and emotive statement about him, and they're saying they've described him as a long-standing friend of Saheti. And they say, we are privileged as a school to have benefited from the life of a man who gave of his time and energy, contributing to the shaping of Saheti. We have walked alongside a man who's become an icon of the struggle against apartheid in South Africa. He stood up for freedom and justice and endorsed Hellenic values, displaying the virtues of respect, courage and duty, even if at own personal cost. Incredible tribute there, Heidi.
Exactly, and those Hellenic values that they speak of is Greek people are all about coming together and helping, and it's all about family values. And I think that's definitely what George Bizos portrayed and lived by. And this is why he was always standing next to the likes of former President Nelson Mandela, always trying to assist, always trying to help. So as much as I might be repeating myself and constantly saying always willing to help, that's just one of the greatest things that I remember him as. And just making such a difference wherever possible. They always say that one of the toughest jobs is either being a journalist or a lawyer, and he was a lawyer. He had to fight in one of the most difficult times in this country during apartheid, where you know, it was so difficult for the likes of Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and him as a white man continued and fought. And represented as much as possible. So that's definitely a thing that I'll always remember by.
And just still with the Saheti School statement, it says here, the Greeks have a word for this, describing George. It is called philotimo. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, Heidi, but they say it's loosely translated as a love of honor. Tell us a little bit more about that word, if you could.
I think it's philotimo, and it probably does mean that. I mean, even though both my parents are Greek, I hope they're not watching because they might be a little disappointed at the moment. But it's definitely, it just portrays the man that he was, the giant that he was, and the love that he portrayed, the friendship that he portrayed, the knowledge that he carried around with him, and so easily was always willing to teach and pass on to everybody around him. So, you know, Saheti definitely was I would say established by him, because he made it an effort to keep to his roots, keep to his traditions. And that's why when he came to South Africa, he was part of the group that formed Saheti School. And that's why if you just Google George Bizos, a lot of the first things that come up speak to how he was constantly at Greek events, constantly attending Saheti events. And again, it just speaks to the kind of person that he was.
Well, Heidi, thank you so much for giving us such an incredible perspective from the Greek community about George Bizos. Thank you very much, Heidi Giokos. And of course, the news this evening, George Bizos has died at the age of 92. Heidi there just paying tribute to him as he was born, of course, in Greece, came to South Africa at the age of about 13 after World War II, as a refugee, in fact. But I'm joined now on the line by lawyer Jeff Budlander. Good evening, Jeff. You know, I'm sure you're still processing the news, but just if you could share your memories of George Bizos. I understand that you studied under him, and just share with us, if you will, your strongest memories of him.
Yes, well, I first met him in 1976 We worked together on a case. I was young Arthur Clark, and he was one of the advocates in the case. And we worked together many times over the 45 years, or 40-odd years, which passed. He was a man with a great passion for justice. He really cared about justice, and he cared about the people who were his clients, and he cared about human rights. Also, a man with a very deep sense of humanity and a very deep wisdom. Lots of insights. One of his great skills was that he was a famously effective cross-examiner, because he had a way of understanding the witnesses, getting into their minds, and then understanding what questions to ask them that would put an end to what they were saying. On occasion, 1976 case, in which a witness gave evidence, George cross-examined him so effectively that the witness phoned the Rand Daily Mail and asked them not to report the evidence. He'd been so thoroughly damaged. He was a very generous man, cared about his friends, was very, very generous to a fault. He was a wonderful host. One of the highlights of being one of his friends was his annual
I'm so sorry, you just broke up there. You were just telling us about the annual...
He was a great man, and a great human being, and a very great friend.
Okay, well, our condolences on losing a friend tonight. And just tell us, you were mentioning that one of the advantages of being his friends, and then unfortunately your phone line just broke up. Just tell us a little bit more.
He was very generous friend, and one of his feats of generosity was every year he had a big party at which he would braai a lamb on the spit. George braaiing a lamb on the spit meant him standing there with a hat and giving instructions to his sons who were doing the hard work. And it was a memorable occasion every year, George's lamb spit braai with all of his friends. I remember Nadine Gordimer was always there. Arthur Chaskelson was always there. All the great figures of that era would gather around and celebrate the year with George.
And it really is, it is a very sad day, because we also are losing all these icons of the struggle against apartheid. And every death, we're saying goodbye a little bit more to that era. It feels as if the chapter is closing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think George's death really is, in a way, the final passing of that generation. The last of the Rivonia trialists has passed away, and now not quite the last of the lawyers, but George was such a powerful figure that his going also signifies very much the end of an era.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if I had to ask for one key memory of him, is it in the courtroom being that incredible cross-examiner you mentioned, or is it the man standing around the lamb braai being a wonderful friend?
The two compete, and they're part of the same personality. And really, his humanity and his generosity were part of who he was as a lawyer. That you can't really separate them out.
Mm. You know, I think what's amazing about him is that he carried on working for so long, and that he was so active right up until his 90s. That energy, what do you think drove it?
It was his passion for justice, and he loved working with young people. He loved having young lawyers around him whom he could work with. He could show them what to do, teach them, because he was an absolutely wonderful storyteller. He had one great story after the other. And what you learned about Greek poetry, you learned the history of the struggle, you learned the history of his life and of the Second World War, you learned all sorts of things, and you learned about the law, of course. And so working with him was a very, very rich experience, because he would share with you his life and his experience and the great stories which he could tell.
When did you last speak to him?
Yeah, I'm in Cape Town, and he was in Joburg, so I haven't seen him for a while. I don't know when it was. It was a while back.
Mm. And are you aware of where his thoughts were around South Africa today and the challenges that we face?
Aware of what his thoughts were?
Yeah.
Well, you know, he was one of those people who remained committed to human rights, whoever, and would challenge the abuser of human rights, whoever they were. He would of course, his great fight was this fight against the apartheid government. But when the ANC government did something wrong, he said so. And so there he was in his 80s at the Legal Resources Centre, still fighting the fight for human rights, sometimes in cases against the very people that he'd worked with and represented when they were on trial for opposition to apartheid. And George's principle was quite simple. He said human rights were for everybody, and they were and everybody whose rights were abused needed to be protected. He would do that regardless.
Well, Jeff Budlander, thank you so much for being prepared to speak to us so soon after this very sad news has broken. And we really do appreciate that you've come through and chatted to us this evening. And, of course, human rights lawyer, anti-apartheid lawyer Jeff Budlander joining us this evening from Cape Town. Thank you very much for your views. And just to